It was a bright morning when General Marcus Johnson walked slowly toward the large courthouse building. He wore a neat gray suit, polished shoes, and carried himself with the calm pride of a man who had served his country for more than 3 decades. To most people, he looked like an ordinary professional, maybe a lawyer or a government officer. What no one could tell at first glance was that Marcus was a 4-star U.S. Army general, a man who had stood beside presidents and planned missions that protected the nation. But on that day, he was simply a citizen attending an official court matter. As he stepped onto the courthouse steps, Marcus noticed the busy scene around him. People hurried in and out, some carrying files, others whispering nervously before facing the judge. He paused for a moment, adjusted his tie, and prepared himself for what he thought would be a routine visit. Little did he know that the day would test not his military skill, but his patience, dignity, and calm strength. At the entrance stood Officer Miller, a young local police officer assigned to courthouse security. Miller was strict by nature, often quick to judge. He had seen many people come and go, and he thought he could size up anyone at a glance. When his eyes fell on Marcus, something inside him hardened. He frowned and stepped forward, blocking the way. "Excuse me," Miller said firmly, holding out his hand. "Where do you think you're going?" Marcus stopped, surprised by the harsh tone. "I have an appointment inside," he answered calmly. "I'm here for an official matter." The officer looked him up and down, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have identification?" "This is a secure area." Marcus nodded, reached into his jacket, and handed over his driver's license. Miller glanced at the name, Marcus Johnson. The name meant nothing to him. Instead of returning the card, Miller gave a skeptical smirk. "This doesn't prove anything," Miller said. "You can't just walk in here. What's your business?" The crowd at the entrance began to notice. A few people slowed down, curious about the conversation. Marcus, still calm, replied, "Officer, I assure you I am expected inside. If you need further proof, I can provide it." But Miller's tone grew sharper. "Don't try to play smart with me. People try tricks all the time. You don't look like someone who belongs in this courthouse." The words carried a sting, though Marcus kept his composure. Years in the military had taught him discipline, and he was not about to lose his temper over an officer's poor judgment. "I'm telling you the truth," Marcus said evenly. "Please allow me to proceed." Instead of listening, Miller stepped closer. "Enough. You're coming with me." Before Marcus could explain further, the officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Gasps rippled through the small crowd as Miller clicked them onto Marcus's wrists. Some bystanders whispered in shock. This man, dressed neatly and speaking with such dignity, was being treated like a criminal. Marcus did not resist. He knew that force would only make the scene worse. He held his head high, even as the cold steel tightened around his wrists. The humiliation was sharp, but he stood in silence, aware that every move he made would be judged. His calmness was his shield. "Let's go," Miller ordered, tugging at his arm. "We'll sort this out inside." The two moved past the metal detectors and into the courthouse lobby. The polished floors echoed with their footsteps, and the large flags on the wall seemed to watch silently. Other officers in the lobby turned their heads, frowning at the unusual sight. A man in a fine suit, handcuffed, guided by Officer Miller. It didn't look right. One of the clerks at the front desk recognized Marcus immediately. She had seen him on television during military ceremonies, standing proudly beside national leaders. Her eyes widened, and her hand froze on the stack of papers she was holding, but fear of stepping into a police matter kept her quiet. She glanced around, hoping someone else would speak up. Meanwhile, Officer Miller forced Marcus to sit on a bench against the wall. "Stay here until I figure out who you really are," he said in a sharp voice. Miller pulled out his notepad, acting as if he had just captured someone dangerous. Marcus looked at him steadily and spoke in a low, measured tone. "Officer, I ask you to think carefully. Do you truly understand who you are detaining?" Miller chuckled, dismissing the words. "Oh, I've heard that line before. Everyone I arrest thinks there's somebody important. Save your stories for the judge." The courthouse lobby grew tense. People waiting for their cases tried to keep their eyes forward, but curiosity pulled their attention toward the scene. Some whispered quietly, "Who is he? Why is he handcuffed? He doesn't look like a criminal." The air carried a mixture of confusion and unease. Marcus sat straight, refusing to slouch or appear broken. Inside, he felt the sting of injustice, but outwardly, He displayed the calm discipline of a soldier who had faced far greater challenges. His silence and dignity contrasted sharply with the officer's arrogance, and this difference did not go unnoticed by the onlookers. A courthouse official, dressed in a dark suit, stepped out of his office and paused when he saw the scene, his brow furrowed in recognition. He had met General Marcus Johnson during a military appreciation event just a year earlier. But now, seeing the man in handcuffs, he hesitated. Should he speak up, or should he let the police handle their own business? His hesitation added to the growing discomfort in the room. Marcus finally broke the silence. Looking directly at the officer, he said softly but firmly, "I have served this nation longer than you have been alive. I do not ask for special treatment, only fair treatment. Check again before you make a mistake you cannot take back." The words hung in the air. Some of the bystanders felt a shiver run down their spines. There was something in his voice, a quiet authority that demanded respect. But Officer Miller refused to bend. He crossed his arms, still standing tall in false confidence. "I don't care who you think you are," Miller replied. "Here, I'm in charge." The courthouse grew quieter. The hum of voices faded as people leaned closer, sensing that this was no ordinary situation. What began as a simple misunderstanding had turned into a clash of authority, one side driven by prejudice and stubbornness, the other by dignity and truth. Marcus knew this moment was only the beginning of a long day, but he also knew he would not allow anger to win. He would wait, he would remain calm, and in time the truth would reveal itself. The courthouse lobby felt heavy with silence after the arrest. People tried to return to their papers and conversations, but their eyes kept drifting toward the man in the gray suit who now sat in handcuffs on the wooden bench. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others whispered, unsure of what to think. General Marcus Johnson sat quietly, his back straight, his face calm. He did not fight against the cuffs or raise his voice. His dignity stood out even more than his polished shoes or neat tie. Officer Miller, still feeling sure of himself, paced back and forth. His boots tapped sharply against the marble floor, echoing louder than they should have in the wide room. He held Marcus's license in his hand and glanced at it again, almost annoyed by how ordinary it looked. "Marcus Johnson," he muttered under his breath, convinced it was just another common name. To him, this man was a liar, nothing more. Marcus watched quietly. He had been in battle zones where chaos filled the air, yet in this calm courthouse he sensed something more dangerous, a blindness caused by prejudice and arrogance. He knew that if he spoke too sharply, things could turn worse. Patience, he reminded himself. Patience had carried him through military strategy, and it would carry him through this injustice. Two other officers walked by and slowed down when they saw the scene. One of them, Officer Daniels, raised his eyebrows. "What's going on here, Miller?" he asked, his tone curious but careful. "Caught this guy trying to get inside," Miller answered quickly. "Claims he's someone important, but I'm not buying it. Probably here to cause trouble." Daniels glanced at Marcus, then back at Miller. "He doesn't look like trouble to me. Did you check properly?" Miller waved the license in the air. "Checked enough. Doesn't matter. He's staying put until I say otherwise." Marcus met Officer Daniels' eyes and gave a small nod as if to say, "It's all right." He had no anger in his face, only calm patience. Daniels frowned, uneasy, but said nothing more. The chain of command inside the courthouse was clear. This was Miller's call. Across the room, a court clerk named Mrs. Peterson had been watching everything. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, and known for remembering faces. She remembered this one. A year ago, she had seen him on television during a Veterans Day ceremony. He had been standing near the president, saluting with a row of medals across his chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she stacked papers on her desk. Should she speak up? Her heart told her yes, but her mind warned her to be careful. She was only a clerk after all. Would they even believe her? The scene grew more tense as people gathered their courage to whisper. A man in a business suit leaned toward another and said softly, "That fellow looks too refined to be a criminal. Something's not right." The other nodded, whispering back, "He looks like someone I've seen on the news. Maybe military?" Miller, overhearing bits of the whispers, grew more irritated. "Everyone, move along," he barked. Nothing to see here. But of course, the more he said it, the more curious everyone became. Marcus finally spoke again, his voice steady. "Officer, you are making a mistake. I am not here to break any law. I am here on official duty." Miller gave a short laugh, shaking his head. Official duty? Sure, that's what they all say. You think you can fool me by talking fancy? Marcus tilted his head slightly, his calm eyes resting on Miller. I am not here to fool you. I am here because this courthouse is expecting me. His words were not loud, yet they carried across the room. People shifted in their seats, sensing the weight in his tone. At that moment, the courthouse doors opened again and a group of lawyers walked in. They noticed the man in cuffs and whispered among themselves. One of them, a middle-aged man with glasses, froze when he recognized Marcus. He had once served as a legal advisor to the army and had met the general during a briefing. His jaw dropped slightly, but like the clerk before him, fear held him back. He knew that if he stepped forward, he might be accused of interfering. Still, his hands tightened around his briefcase as he debated within himself. Meanwhile, Officer Miller grew restless. He pulled out his radio and began making notes in his notepad. What's your real story? He demanded. Who are you pretending to be? Marcus looked directly at him, his voice firm yet calm. I do not pretend. I am General Marcus Johnson of the United States Army. You are holding me without reason. The words caused a ripple through the crowd. Some gasped softly. Others leaned forward to see his face more clearly. The title General carried weight even for those who knew nothing about military ranks. A hush fell over the lobby as people processed what they had just heard. Miller snorted, refusing to show doubt. A general? Sitting here in cuffs? Don't waste my time. You're nobody. But his voice shook just slightly. The name, the confidence, the way the man carried himself. It planted a small seed of doubt in his mind. Though he quickly tried to bury it, Marcus, seeing the officer's stubbornness, chose not to argue further. He leaned back against the bench and remained silent, allowing the silence itself to speak louder than any protest. His stillness carried more strength than shouting ever could. One of the younger courthouse staff members whispered to another, he really might be telling the truth. Look at the way he sits, like he's used to command. The other nodded nervously. If he really is a general, this officer is in serious trouble. Minutes dragged by, the tension thick. The whispers continued, the unease spread, and Officer Miller tried harder to appear in control. But his confidence was beginning to crack under the weight of so many watching eyes. Finally, Marcus lifted his gaze toward Miller and asked quietly, Will you allow me one phone call? That is all I ask. The request startled the room. People exchanged glances. The calm, steady voice sounded less like a plea and more like a simple statement of right. Miller smirked, trying to brush it off. One phone call? What are you going to do? Call your friends to come rescue you? Marcus did not flinch. He kept his eyes steady and repeated, one phone call. The crowd grew even more curious. Some leaned closer, others held their breath. It felt like the air itself was waiting for Miller's answer. The young officer, trying to show he was still in control, finally shrugged. Fine, one call, but don't think it'll save you. Marcus gave a slight nod, his face showing no victory, only calm certainty. He knew the truth was about to unfold. The courthouse lobby, filled with unease and whispers, was about to witness a moment none of them would forget. The room grew quiet as Marcus Johnson was finally allowed to make one phone call. The young officer, Miller, placed a phone on the desk with a smug look, confident that nothing would come of it. To him, this was just another trick from a man who wanted to look important. He crossed his arms, waiting for the moment when the so-called general would embarrass himself in front of everyone. Marcus, still in handcuffs, reached for the phone with steady hands. His movements were slow, calm, and precise, like a man who knew he did not need to rush. He dialed a number that only a few people in the world carried. The buttons beeped one after another, and then he lifted the receiver to his ear. Pentagon operations, this is command, came a crisp, professional voice on the other end. The sound alone shifted the air in the courthouse lobby. It was not the voice of a friend or neighbor. It was the voice of someone inside the highest circle of national defense. Marcus spoke in his usual calm tone. This is General Marcus Johnson. I am currently being detained at the county courthouse without cause. Please confirm my identity and notify the proper channels. The entire lobby froze. The crowd that had been whispering went completely silent, leaning closer to catch every word. Even Officer Daniels, who had been skeptical of Miller's actions earlier, straightened and blinked in surprise. He had heard the name. He had heard the title. On the other end of the line, the voice stiffened. Yes, sir. Confirming your identity immediately. Please hold. Miller's smirk began to falter. He shifted his weight, suddenly less confident. He could hear the seriousness in the tone of the person on the other side of the line. This was no ordinary call. He looked around the room and noticed that everyone was staring, not at Marcus, but at him. Doubt crept into his chest like a weight he couldn't shake off. Within moments, another voice came on the line. This one was firmer, higher in authority. General Johnson, we confirm your status. We are dispatching communication directly to the courthouse. You will be released immediately. Stay where you are. We apologize for the inconvenience, sir. Marcus simply replied, Thank you. He hung up the phone, placed it gently back on the receiver, and leaned back against the bench. He did not need to say another word. His calm silence was more powerful than any outburst could ever be. The silence in the courthouse lobby was thick. A few gasps rose from the crowd. Someone whispered, He really is a general. Another person added softly, That officer just arrested a 4-star general. The color drained from Officer Miller's face. His smug smile was gone, replaced by a nervous swallow. His hand twitched at his side as if he wanted to undo the handcuffs instantly. But he was frozen in place, caught between his pride and the truth. A courthouse clerk, the same one who had recognized Marcus earlier, stepped forward at last. I knew it, she said in a shaky voice. I've seen him before. That man is a hero. He's been honored by presidents. The murmurs grew stronger now. People began pulling out their phones, searching for his name. In seconds, pictures of General Marcus Johnson in uniform covered in medals appeared on glowing screens. There he was, saluting at ceremonies, standing beside leaders of the nation, giving speeches to troops. One by one, people turned their screens toward each other. The proof was undeniable. Officer Daniels stepped closer, his voice low but serious. Miller, you need to take those cuffs off, now! Miller hesitated, his pride still clinging to him like armor. I was just following protocol, he stammered. I didn't take them off, Daniels repeated, firmer this time. Hands trembling, Miller reached for the keys on his belt. He fumbled with the lock, the metallic click of the cuffs unlocking ringing loudly in the silent room. When the steel finally loosened, Marcus slowly pulled his wrists free and rubbed them lightly, leaving faint red marks where the cuffs had pressed against his skin. He stood up tall, taller than everyone else in the lobby, his presence filling the space like a quiet storm. The crowd looked at him with a mix of awe and shame. Awe for the strength and dignity he carried. Shame for having stood by while he was treated unfairly. Marcus turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the people around him. His calm gaze seemed to reach into their hearts, reminding them of a truth they had nearly ignored, that respect should be given to every human being, not only when titles or power were revealed. At that very moment, the courthouse doors burst open. 2 military police officers in crisp uniforms hurried inside, followed by a senior official from the Pentagon. Their faces were serious, their steps brisk. They went directly to Marcus, saluted sharply, and addressed him with respect. General Johnson, sir, we apologize for the delay. Orders from the Pentagon. We are here to escort you and ensure your safety. The room was stunned. People had never seen such a scene in a courthouse lobby before. Even those who had doubted were now certain. This man was exactly who he said he was, and more. Marcus returned the salute with quiet dignity, then lowered his hand. Thank you, he said simply. He did not raise his voice, but his calmness carried power. The military officers turned toward Miller. One of them spoke coldly. Which one of you placed the general in cuffs? Miller's mouth opened, but no words came. His pride and fear collided inside him. The other officer, Daniels, spoke up instead. It was Miller. He didn't believe the general's identity. The Pentagon official stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. You've made a serious mistake today. This will be reported immediately. Miller's face burned red. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but the words tangled in his throat. No excuse could undo the scene everyone had just witnessed. Meanwhile, Marcus remained calm. He raised his hand gently, signaling for quiet. I appreciate your concern, he said to the officials, but I do not wish to see anger spread further. The truth has been shown. That is enough for now. His words carried weight, calming the storm before it grew larger. Even those who came to defend him fell silent, impressed by his grace under such treatment. The crowd in the lobby stood taller now, ashamed of their earlier silence. Some bowed their heads, others whispered apologies softly under their breath, even though the words might not reach him. They had witnessed something greater than a mistake. They had seen the contrast between arrogance and dignity, between prejudice and patience. Marcus adjusted his suit jacket, his calmness never breaking. He looked at Miller one last time, not with anger, but with a quiet firmness that cut deeper than any harsh words could. "Officer," he said softly, "next time listen before you act." And with that he turned toward the courtroom where he was originally headed, escorted by the military police. The crowd slowly parted, giving him a clear path. Some even clapped softly, unable to hold back their respect. Behind him, Miller stood frozen, the weight of his mistake pressing harder with each passing second. He had wanted to show control, but instead he had revealed his own weakness. The sound of the phone call to the Pentagon, the confirmation, the arrival of military police. Those moments would echo in his memory for years. For Marcus, the incident was already behind him. His focus was not on revenge or punishment. His focus was on the lesson, one that had been revealed not just to Officer Miller but to everyone in that courthouse lobby. The truth had spoken, and it needed no raised voice to be heard. The heavy silence in the courthouse lobby began to lift after the handcuffs were removed and the Pentagon officials arrived. General Marcus Johnson stood tall, his presence filling the space like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. People who had been whispering earlier now stood straighter, as if they too felt the weight of the moment. Respect began to replace curiosity, and shame began to replace doubt. Marcus adjusted his suit jacket and looked around. He did not raise his chin with pride, nor did he scowl with anger. Instead, he held himself with the same calmness that had carried him through the entire ordeal. His eyes met those of the courthouse clerks, the lawyers, and even the curious bystanders. Each person felt deep down that they had just witnessed something bigger than an arrest. The military police officers who had entered saluted again, ready to escort him wherever he needed to go. But Marcus raised his hand slightly, signaling them to wait. He turned back toward the very bench where he had sat in cuffs just minutes earlier. Slowly, he placed his hand on the wooden surface, almost as if marking it in memory. Then he faced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice calm yet powerful. "What you saw today was not just about me. It was about how quickly we can judge one another, and how important it is to pause, to ask, to listen before we act." The words echoed across the lobby, drawing the full attention of everyone present. Even the guards near the door stopped moving. Marcus did not speak loudly, but his tone carried the authority of a man who had led thousands. "Some of you may have recognized me," he continued. "Some may not have. But that does not matter. What matters is that dignity belongs to every person, whether they are in uniform or in plain clothes, whether they carry medals or not." A quiet wave of shame swept through the crowd. The clerk who had recognized him earlier lowered her head. The lawyers who had stayed silent shuffled uncomfortably. Even those who had whispered in curiosity felt the sting of his words. They realized they had been witnesses but not protectors, and their silence had allowed the wrong to stretch longer than it should have. Marcus turned toward Officer Miller. The young officer's face was pale, his lips pressed tightly together. He seemed smaller now, stripped of his earlier confidence. Marcus did not glare at him, nor did he scold him with anger. Instead, his expression was steady, his eyes sharp but not cruel. "Officer," Marcus said softly, "when you wear a badge, you carry more than authority. You carry responsibility. You carry the trust of the people you serve. Use it carefully." The word struck deeper than any formal punishment could. Miller's shoulders slumped. He wanted to speak, to explain himself, but the words stuck in his throat. He had no excuse, and deep down he knew it. One of the Pentagon officials stepped forward, his tone clipped. "General, we can proceed with formal reports. This officer will face consequences for his actions." But Marcus lifted his hand gently to stop him. "Let the system handle what it must," he said. "I am not here to demand punishment. I am here to remind us all that respect is not optional. It is essential." The official hesitated, then nodded, clearly moved by the general's choice to focus on the lesson rather than vengeance. The lobby seemed to breathe again. A few people even began clapping softly, though Marcus did not encourage it. He simply gave a small nod of gratitude and turned toward the courtroom hallway. His steps were steady, dignified, and unhurried, as if he carried not just his own honor but the weight of the lesson that had unfolded. As he walked, a lawyer stepped forward. "General," the man said respectfully, "on behalf of those of us who remained silent, I apologize. We should have spoken sooner." Marcus paused, looking at him with calm eyes. "The lesson is not in the past," he replied. "It is in what you do next time." Then he continued walking. Inside the courtroom, judges and clerks quickly stood when Marcus entered. They had already heard whispers of what had happened outside. Some bowed their heads slightly, embarrassed that such a scene had taken place within their walls. But Marcus did not dwell on it. He carried himself with quiet control, addressing the matter that had brought him there in the first place. Meanwhile, back in the lobby, people continued to talk in hushed voices. "I can't believe that happened," one woman whispered. "A general treated like that." Another man shook his head. "It shows how dangerous quick judgment can be." The story was already spreading even before the newspapers could write about it. Those who had been there knew they would never forget. Officer Miller remained near the bench, his heart heavy. For the first time, he realized the depth of his mistake, not just in arresting the wrong man, but in treating someone with disrespect simply because of his own assumptions. The general's words replayed in his mind. "When you wear a badge, you carry more than authority. You carry responsibility." They cut deeper than any reprimand could. Later that day, after Marcus finished his court business, he walked back through the lobby. The crowd had thinned, but a few people were still there. They stepped aside respectfully, giving him space. Some nodded silently, as if offering quiet apologies. Marcus acknowledged them with a gentle nod, then walked out into the sunlight. The military officers followed him, but Marcus paused on the courthouse steps. He looked out at the busy street, the cars passing, the people walking by. Life went on, as it always did. But for those who had been inside the courthouse that morning, something had changed. They had seen a powerful lesson, that dignity is not about rank, but about humanity. Marcus turned to the military police. "Gentlemen, thank you. That will be all." He dismissed them kindly, not wanting a scene to follow him. Then with the same calm stride, he walked toward his car. His day had been shaken, but not his spirit. He carried himself with the same steady strength that had earned him the respect of a nation. And inside the courthouse, people still spoke in whispers. Some were ashamed, some inspired, and some deeply thoughtful. They all knew one thing. They would remember General Marcus Johnson's composure long after the memory of Officer Miller's arrogance had faded. News of the courthouse incident spread faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, it was on television, radio, and every major newspaper. Headlines carried the story of the decorated U.S. Army general, who had been handcuffed in public until one phone call to the Pentagon changed everything. Pictures of Marcus Johnson in uniform, saluting proudly, appeared beside reports of the arrest. The courthouse staff, who had been silent, felt uneasy, seeing their place of work described across the nation. Some admitted quietly that they should have spoken up earlier. Others confessed that the general's calm response had inspired them to rethink how they treated strangers. In Washington, the Pentagon took the matter seriously. Senior officials held discussions about the incident, not just because it involved a four-star general, but because it revealed something larger, how easily authority could be misused if unchecked. Letters and calls of support poured in for Marcus. Veterans, soldiers, and ordinary citizens all expressed outrage at the disrespect he had endured, and admiration for the dignity with which he handled it. Meanwhile, Officer Miller sat in his small apartment that night, unable to sleep. His mind replayed the general's words over and over. "When you wear a badge, you carry more than authority. You carry responsibility." Miller thought of the looks on people's faces when the truth was revealed, the shame that had filled the room, and the disappointment in his fellow officers' eyes. For the first time in his career, he realized that authority without humility could destroy trust. Back at the Pentagon, Marcus was asked if he wanted to press charges or demand formal punishment. He declined. His voice was steady as he said, "This is not about me. It is about the bigger picture. If consequences are needed, let them come through the right channels. What matters more is that we all learn from this." His response surprised many. Some expected anger, others expected demands. Instead, they saw a man who had faced humiliation but refused to answer with revenge. That choice alone added to his reputation. In the weeks that followed, Marcus was invited to speak at several events about leadership, fairness, and dignity. At one gathering filled with young police cadets, he stood at the podium in his uniform, medals shining under the lights. The room was silent, every cadet focused on his words. Authority, he told them, is not about power over others. It is about service. Every decision you make carries weight. Every action you take can build trust or break it. Do not be quick to judge. Ask questions, listen. Respect those you serve even when you think you already know their story. The cadets clapped, some even standing as they applauded. They knew they were hearing not just a speech but wisdom carved from experience. Back in his hometown, people approached Marcus on the street to thank him. A woman at the grocery store whispered, "General, I watched you on the news. Thank you for showing us how patience is stronger than anger." A teenager shook his hand and said, "Sir, you proved what real strength looks like." Marcus always smiled humbly, never boasting but accepting their words with quiet gratitude. As for Officer Miller, his career changed course. After the investigation, he was disciplined and removed from courthouse duty. But instead of ending his service completely, the department placed him in mandatory training programs about bias, respect, and community responsibility. At first he resisted, feeling bitter. But slowly the lesson sank in. He realized that his pride had blinded him, and that he had judged a man not by truth, but by assumption. One day, months later, Miller attended a public ceremony where Marcus was being honored for his leadership. Standing quietly in the crowd, Miller listened to the general speak. He felt a deep mix of regret and respect. When the event ended, he hesitated, then walked forward. "General Johnson," he said nervously, "I don't know if you remember me." Marcus turned, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "I remember." Miller swallowed hard. "I just want to say, I was wrong. I judged too quickly. I disrespected you, and I disrespected my badge. I'm sorry." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Marcus placed a hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Acknowledging your mistake is the first step toward becoming better. Learn from it. Grow from it. That will be your true test." Miller nodded, his eyes misty. Knowing those words were not just forgiveness, they were guidance. The incident slowly faded from daily news, but its lesson remained alive in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Teachers used it as an example in classrooms about fairness and respect. Police academies added it to their training material. Community leaders spoke of it when reminding people about humility and patience. For Marcus, life went on as before. He continued his service, guiding younger officers, mentoring soldiers, and representing his country with honor. Yet, whenever he looked at the faint marks left by the handcuffs on his wrists, he did not feel bitterness. He felt resolve. Resolve to keep teaching others that dignity was not about medals, uniforms, or titles. It was about the way a person carried themselves when tested. In time, the story became more than just a news headline. It became a reminder told in households, classrooms, and training halls, that even when treated unfairly, one can choose calm over anger, dignity over pride, and wisdom over revenge. The courthouse incident was no longer remembered as a shameful arrest, but as a powerful lesson. A lesson that began with injustice but ended with inspiration. A lesson that proved true respect is not given because of power. It is given because of humanity. And General Marcus Johnson, with his steady voice and calm presence, had shown the world exactly what that meant.